Howdy, Rebels. Welcome to Rebel Guerrilla News Network. Today we will be discussing whether or not Hop Pop, aka Hopadiah Planner, is a Maoist. Hop Pop is the head of the Planner household. He takes care of his grandchildren, Polly and Sprig. He also takes care of Amboon Choi, human girl that got teleported to Amphibia. He owns a little plot of land that he and his family farm on. Now that we've covered briefly who Hop Pop is, let's cover if Hop Pop is a Maoist. To understand Maoism, we have to understand whose ideas Mao was inspired by and how he adapted and added to these ideas. Well, first of all, Mao was a Marxist, specifically a Marxist-Leninist. The ideas that Mao added to has been called Marxism-Leninism, Mao Zedong thought. Mao was applying Marxism to the conditions in China, which is what led to MLMZT. The Communist Party of Peru synthesized these ideas into Marxism-Leninism Maoism, which attempts to universalize the ideas into a practice that can be adopted and utilized anywhere. So, we will be breaking down the basics of MLM. Let's start with Marxism and work outward from there. Karl Marx was a German philosopher, economist, and revolutionary. He was inspired by another German philosopher named Gregor Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel. Hegel was a philosopher that basically said to understand something, you split it into two opposing forces. See how they push and pull on each other, contradict each other, and so on and so on. Synthesis, antithesis, synthesis. This way of thinking is called dialectics. Let's have an example. To understand feudalism through dialectics. Feudalism has two major groups which make it up: lords and serfs. Lords own all the land, and the serfs work the land. The lord wants the serfs to work as hard as possible for as long as possible, so the lord can take as much as possible. The serf wants the polar opposite. They want to work as easily as possible for as short a time as possible, and the serfs want to keep the majority of what they produce. Do you see that they have contradictory goals, but are stuck in the same system? So on the one hand, lords, that's thesis. On the other hand, serfs, that's antithesis. How do we resolve their contradictory interests? Through struggle. The serfs revolt, the lords send the knights to put them back in line. They struggle until the serfs overthrow feudalism. Synthesis. The contradictions of feudalism are ended by its overthrow. This idea of struggle between opposing forces is central to the theory of Marxism, first developed by Marx and Engels. This process of looking at the material world and seeing opposing classes is dialectical materialism, the heart and soul of Marxism. So, that's the basics of Marxism. There is the origin state, family, property, and the anarchy of the market, and other Marxist concepts, but we have to move on now. Let's add Lenin's theory to Marx and Engels' contributions. Lenin's biggest contributions are the concepts of democratic centralism and the Vanguard Party. Now, let's start with the Vanguard Party. The Vanguard Party is a group of dedicated revolutionaries that work to overthrow the system. They aim to educate and organize the working class to agitate and revolt. This is done by joining and bringing together labor unions, student groups, women organizations, and other such groups. The revolution will be fought by and for the masses. Read Lenin's What is to be Done to learn more about the Vanguard Party. Now, on to democratic centralism. Democratic centralism is basically this: diversity in thought, unity in action. Ideas and policies will be debated by everyone present, and they can say their piece. Once a consensus has been reached, everyone must carry it out in its fullest. This can be done at the local, state, and federal level to ensure unity and cohesion within the Communist Party. Now, finally, let's move on to Mao. Mao's main contributions to Marxist theory are the mass line, People's War, and Cultural Revolution. Now, to make sure the Communist Party isn't just a group of elites doing their own thing while ignoring the masses of people, the concept of the mass line fixes this. I'll quote Mao directly. In all the practical work of our party, all correct leadership is essentially from the masses to the masses. This means take the ideas of the masses, scattered and unsystematic ideas, and concentrate them. Through study, turn them into concentrated and systematic ideas. Then go to the masses and propagate and explain these ideas, until the masses embrace them as their own. Hold fast to them and translate them into action, and test the correctness of these ideas in such action. Then, once again, concentrate ideas from the masses and once again go to the masses so the ideas are persevered in and carried on through. And so on over and over again, into an endless spiral with the ideas becoming more correct, more vital, and richer each time. Such is a Marxist theory of knowledge. Unquote. So let's break that down. Instead of the party being a top-down commanding force over the people, it's bottom-up. First, the masses tell their problems to the party and what needs to be done. Second, the party studies their ideas and makes a solution. Third, the party explains the solution to the masses. And lastly, the masses solve their own problems. So the party and the people work in unity to solve the problems. If the masses have the problem, the party offers a solution. Then the masses solve their own problem. This is the most democratic idea I have ever heard from any political philosophy. Now on to protracted People's War. To me, protracted People's War is unity between the vanguard party and the mass line. Protracted People's War is when revolutionaries embed themselves within the masses, works with them, and earns their trust and support. Then they together wage a prolonged asymmetrical guerrilla war campaign against the current state. There may be multiple pockets of guerrillas that are fighting independently of each other with a shared goal of socialism. Diversity in tactics, unity in goals amongst the different guerrilla groups. So again, it is a decentralized bottom-up method of overthrowing a state. Protracted People's War as of 2023 is being done by the Naxalites in India and the New People's Army in the Philippines. And the last Maoist concept we will cover is cultural evolution. Marxism aims to overthrow the political and economic system. Mao says that's all good for you and yours, but you also need to turn the culture on its head, like Antonio Gramsci says. Thus, the masses need to turn over the four olds. Old ideas, old culture, old customs, and old habits. So basically, I'm sorry, Jimbo, the revolutionary masses of the youth have declared you a counter-revolutionary. You know what? Since you've been such good listeners, you get one more tangent about the dictatorship of the proletariat. Marx and Engels came up with this concept. Let's first uncover the dictatorship of the bourgeoisie so we can understand what the dictatorship of the proletariat is in contrast. Marxists correctly believe that liberal democracy, while presenting itself as an institution that reflects the will of the people, Marxists know that liberal democracy at its core really reflects the will of the ruling class. The United States of America is the best example of this. Let's start with the origin of the United States. 25 of the 55 delegates of the Constitutional Convention were slave owners. Alexander Hamilton only wanted property-owning white men to be able to vote. John Adams carried similar sentiments. The country was built upon the genocide of one race, the indigenous, and the enslavement of another, the African slaves. Some tribes of indigenous had upwards of 90% of their populations murdered. While the Founding Fathers were not the first to practice slavery, chattel slavery was a uniquely horrific institution. The founding of the United States in 1776 didn't decrease the amount of slavery in the United States. In fact, it increased. While white indentured servants lived and worked with similar conditions to black slaves, they formed alliances and did revolts, which caused the slave owners to grant rights and better status to white servants. This was when there was an official legal distinction between whites and blacks. Women, despite being half the population, were barred from being able to vote, and were basically de facto property of their husbands. Men could beat their wives, and women could do nothing about this. Contrast this with the Russian and Chinese revolutions. Lenin said that every farmer and baker should learn how to govern. And in the USSR, there is the Koronatsia, I hope I pronounced that right. It was indigenization policy, which mandated that all the various ethnic groups should learn to read and write in their native languages. The policy virtually abolished illiteracy among men and women of all ages and ethnicities. The USSR and the PRC made everyone equals, versus USA made a hierarchical structure. In the PRC, from 1949 to Mao's death in 1976, life expectancy increased by 31 years. The population doubled from around 450 million to 900 million. Literacy was raised from 20% to 93%. The USA, from its very beginning, was a settler-colonial, racist, patriarchal project, in sharp contrast to the ideals of the USSR and the PRC. Even in the land of the free in 2023, 20% of the population is functionally illiterate, mass homelessness, healthcare that is the most expensive yet the worst in the developed world, the world's highest prison population, 25% of adults are food secure, and 1 in 8 children are hungry. even though 40% of the food we produce, we toss out. So much for the efficiency of the market. Not to mention, statistically speaking, the United States Congress doesn't care what U.S. voters want. The opinions of 90% of Americans has a statistically insignificant effect on policy. And this is in the so-called most democratic country in the world. But if you have money, you can say jump, and Congress will say how high. This is what Marxists mean when we say that liberal democracy is really the dictatorship of the bourgeoisie, the ruling class. So we need democratic institutions where workers not only control politics but also the economy. Basically, a dictatorship of the proletariat, or where the working class holds political power. Complete political power. The U.S. ruling class uses its military to get resources and overthrow governments that step out of line.
Hey, we got K rounds, Glocks with 30, run up on me, I'ma do you dirty. Hey, we got K rounds, 762, so you know I gotta be.
Remember this video when it was about Hop Pop? Let's answer the question that we asked in the beginning. We'll assume that Hop Pop practices Marxism, Leninism, Maoism, the synthesis of Maoist and Marxist-Leninist thought that was developed by the Communist Party of Peru. I'm a Maoist third worldist myself, or a third world Maoist, however you want to say it. Well, Hop Pop lives in a town of Wortwood. Wortwood is largely an agrarian society, similar to China and Russia before the revolutions. It has a small merchant class. Let's observe the scene where Hop Pop kicks off the revolution. Here, the planters and Anne resist the knights, trying to take their snail Bessie. This impresses the masses, and they rally alongside them. This was the Wortwood Revolution. This is kind of similar to the February Revolution in Russia. The February Revolution was when there was a workers' strike in St. Petersburg, and there were police on horseback that were called in to crush the strike. Russian soldiers in reserve and the workers got guns, shot at the police, and destroyed police stations. This kicked off what would lead to the completion of the revolution in October. This spontaneous event would lead to where Wortwood would have greater autonomy. A while after the Wortwood Revolution, there were re-elections for mayor. Hop Pop goes against incumbent mayor Toadstool. They, as per custom, have a contest of strength, which brings us to one of Mao's most famous quotes: "Civilize the mind, make savage the body." After their trials, Hop Pop wins all of Wortwood's votes, but the rest of Amphibia voted for Toadstool, so Toadstool wins. Basically electoral college, where even if you win, you lose. Later on, the Toads round up the residents of Wortwood for a banquet. In reality, it was a plot to kill Hop Pop, the leader of the revolution. This failed because the masses rallied behind Hop Pop, and they fought against the counter-revolutionaries. Later in the series, when Anne, Marcy, and the planners go to Newtopia, where they meet King Andreas. King Andreas is obviously a monarch, in his name King, but what's even scarier is that his ancestors forced him to invade other dimensions and colonially occupy them, like the UK did to India, which killed over 100 million people. Come to think of it, Amphibia has a loose racial caste system where frogs are at the bottom, toads are in the middle, and newts are at the top of the caste. So Hop Pop leads the liberation movement to end genocide, colonialism, and the caste system. Now let's heed the advice of Hop Pop.
Eat the rich! Whatever happens in the Bazaar stays in the Bazaar.
Aw, man.
Now, onto the final revolutionary push. The liberation of Amphibia was won by the alliance between the three races. Hop Pop helped form the alliance, and together they did a head-on assault on King Andreas and his forces. So, not exactly a drawn-out struggle like Protected People's War, but one could argue that the conditions in Amphibia were ripe for a head-on conflict, which was the best option in that case. So, is Hop Pop a Maoist? Maybe. He doesn't exactly have a class analysis, and he doesn't exactly apply the mass line, but what is undeniable is that Hop Pop is a revolutionary. So, that was the end of the video. This is off script. Thank you for watching. It was mostly a shitpost. It was 90% Marxist theory and 10% Amphibia content. The next video will be a lot shorter, and I'll actually use a teleprompter, so I'm looking at the screen and not doing that kind of stuff, bobbing my head, looking at the ground like a psycho. So yeah, thank you for watching. My next video is going to be about how the Tuskens, the Sand People, in Star Wars on the planet Tatooine are the indigenous and the humans are the settler colonial occupiers, and why the Sand People do terrorist attacks against the humans is because they're settlers and they want their land back. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
Did you figure it out yet? What to do with this figurative outlet? I'm running my mouth at heaven. Slept well in a couple of days, trying to figure it out, but I'm stuck in the shapes that I'm handed. Power to the people, they demand it. What kind of power, man, I can't understand it. Was it booming in the Soviet Union? Presuming that it was Lenin that you zoomed in. But y'all, was Stalinism ill? If not, it's an Oviev. Kamenev deserved to get killed. I'm split like Society Soviet. Am I just a liberal if I ain't got the point yet? Can't make art if you can't take a stand. But this shit right here, for those still fall. Power to the Soviets, still will defend. Cause it was the first time that they made the attempt.